Hey guys, NJ here, and today we are looking at my Taranis X9D Plus, and more specifically the custom paint job that I've achieved recently on this. You'll know that I have been using the Taranis QX7 for a little while as my daily driver, and the more I've used that, the more I've kind of not used this and fallen out of love with it a bit because I'm fickle. And to be honest with you, when the M9 gimbals turned up for this, which are fantastic gimbals, you know, there's a review video on that I've just done, I'll link it in the description. I thought I'm going to be taking the gimbals out, why not just, you know, go the extra mile, strip this thing down completely and give it a nice custom paint job, and then fit these rather excellent custom inlays. I'll talk a little bit more about those later in the video. Now this wasn't a happy accident. I do have a little bit of experience with using spray paints and how to achieve a finish like this, so I'm going to talk you through with some pictures exactly how to go about that. And before we start, I also want to talk with you a little bit about some tips for when you do strip this down, so that you don't end up running into problems when you reassemble it. The actual strip down takes about 20 minutes. It's not particularly difficult, but there's a few little things you can do just to make life a little bit easier for yourself. In terms of the finish, you'll see we have this kind of piano black look here. Now under this iridescent light you can't really see it, but it is actually a kind of metallic pearlescent kind of finish, and in daylight it really does sparkle. The type of paints that I use, so I just went to, we have a store here in the UK called Halfords, which sell standard car paints, and the paint that I used in this case, but you know, it's pretty cheap standard stuff. I'm sure you can find that at any auto store wherever you are. The colour that I went for is Vauxhall, or if you're outside the UK, Opel, black sapphire pearlescent spray paint. So yeah, very standard stuff. 300ml can is more than enough for what you'll need, so I picked up one of those. I also picked up a clear lacquer coat which goes on at the end to give it that nice high glossy finish. I also have, and this is just good stuff to have in your inventory anyway, rubbing alcohol. At least 70% is what you want. This is really good for cleaning, removing any grease when you're preparing the surface of the Taranis for spray painting. And then also the other thing you're going to need is this is some 2000 grit wet and dry paper, and what we're using that for is to scuff the surface of the Taranis up in preparation for having that first coat of paint go down. So yeah, let's move on to having a quick look inside of this, and then we'll go forward and talk about how we achieve the finish. So here we're looking at the inside of the front half of the Taranis. When you open this up, and there are lots of videos on looking inside the Taranis, there's certainly a few that I have where you can see this in more detail. The main thing to do is to properly separate it, so do disengage those two ribbon cables down at the bottom by pulling those two brown sections of those levers down, just to release those, and then you can work on just exclusively this half. Now you'll see I have the M9 gimbals in here, so it will look a little different to yours, but it's basically the same thing. Now one thing you will notice here is that I've gone around with a black marker pen, and I have just marked each component just to make reassembly a little bit easier. You can in fact install the trim switches the wrong way round, so when it comes to putting them back on, I found it was very handy tip to actually mark on and actually put a numbering system on those. You'll see I've numbered 1, 2, 3 and 4 on those trims, so I know not only which way up they should be, but also what order in which to put them back. So that's the first thing, and then up at the top you see I've also had a system of marking those switches so I know which way round they go and which side they go. This will just take away the headaches. It takes a couple of minutes to do, well worth doing before you move forward. Now when it comes to removing that lower LCD board, there's 5 screws to get it away. Obviously you want to unplug all the plugs first. As it pulls away, you'll see 2 rows of 3 buttons on the flanks, and those are the buttons that you interface with either side of the LCD around the front. Now those are spot welded in other words the plastic is just melted at 2 lugs to hold those buttons in place. Now you will more than likely break them as you remove them. It really is nothing to worry about. When you come to put them back, you just use a dab of thick CA glue to hold those in place, let it cure fully, and then you can reinstall this. Nothing to worry about, very simple. Other than that, the rest of this is very logical, easy to pull apart, and should take you around 15 to 20 minutes to do so. Now when it comes to preparing the surface of the Taranis, you don't actually need to worry about priming this, and the underlying colour, which is that kind of silvery grey, is absolutely fine. There's nothing to worry about from that point of view. All you're really doing with a primer is trying to get a nice flat surface and something for the paint to grab onto. Now in terms of being flat, the Taranis already comes with a kind of silver colour. It is very flat as it is. All we need to do is make that a nice surface that's clean, prepared, ready for paint to grab onto it. Now the way to do that once you have this apart and you just have the shell is actually to get something like a 2000 grit wet and dry and to literally start rubbing and scuffing up that surface so that we get this to be nice and smooth. We've taken out any blemishes, any lumps that might be there, or any imperfections in the original paint, just to get it nice and flat and prepared, and that slightly rough texture will make for an excellent surface for the paint to grab onto. So once you've been round and scuffed as many of the surface area as possible, the second step following that is to then take your isopropyl rubbing alcohol. We're going to take a bit of that on a cloth, and then you're just literally, the aim is now to clean off all of that dust that you've created while you were rubbing it down, and to get any grease marks that's come off of your hands, because grease is the last thing that you want the paint to be sticking to. All of those things, just trying to clean it up as much as possible with the rubbing alcohol, and what you should end up with is a nice clean and scuffed up and nice and flat finish, and then that will be nice and ready for having the first coat of paint go down onto it. So there's two types of coating that we're going to be concentrating on doing in terms of spraying technique. When it comes to putting the paint on itself, your main primary colour, what you want to do is apply very thin dusting coats that are literally just passing across with the spray can and keeping it very light. That is often where people go wrong, is they are far too heavy with their coats, and you get the paint start to build up, it starts lumping, it forms it grabs in areas and starts making big drip marks. You really, if you're patient with this area, it will not only dry faster, but you'll get a much flatter, more even finish. So this is what I will do. Shake the hell out of the can. You really need to make sure that your paint is as mixed up as possible, and then what I would consider a light coat is literally from this kind of distance, spray, 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 and that's it. It is literally a dusting, and I'll show you a picture of that just so you can see exactly what I would consider to be one or two coats. And this is what two coats looks like. It's very patchy, it's very thin, it's very sparse, and this is exactly what you want to build up that nice flat finish. Don't fall into the trap of thinking I've missed a bit and spraying, and then I've missed a bit and spraying. That's the last thing you want to do. That's where lumps and drops will start to form. So the best thing to do is do a light dusting like this, let it dry, use a hairdryer or a heat gun if you want, just to kind of speed the process up, because I'm sure we haven't all got paint ovens where you can bake this and accelerate the process. But the main thing to do is, as you do that, keep rotating, keep coming in at different angles to try and get the coverage to be even, but allow time to dry, and make sure that you keep it nice and light as you go. You could end up with as much as 20 layers in the process before you get the desired finish, but it will be better, it will be flat, and it will work out much nicer in the long run. It will also dry quicker. And here we are at around 10 coats in, and the main thing, keep rotating that shell so that we get a nice even coverage. We don't end up with any spots that aren't getting any paint, and we should end up with a nice finish. And if we look at this close up, you can see that as this is built up, the finish is nice, it is even, it's slightly mottled. Don't worry about that. This is what it should start to look like. And here we are, finished up at around 15 coats. This is now dry, and this is what it looks like. You might decide that this is the look you're after and you don't want a gloss coat. It has a slightly satin finish to it, but I will be moving on to now applying that wet lacquer coat to bring up the gloss and bring out the metallic in the paint. So what you want to do in this case is actually not what we did when it came to applying the base colour coat. First of all, leave it to dry, and I mean leave it. You want to leave this thing to dry for at least 24 hours for that paint to harden. What some people would do if they're working on car paints, and it does depend on the type of paint you're using, would then be to again apply some very like a rubbing compound or a very high grit wet and dry to actually further flatten off that kind of mottled effect from the paint layers going down, and to get it as flat as possible before applying the lacquer. Now I don't bother with that. Normally once I've got to the stage where I'm happy with the paint, I will let it harden, I will let it dry for 24 hours, and then when it comes to putting the clear coat on, what you're aiming to do is a much heavier but consistent, nice even consistent spray, and what we're aiming for is called a wet coat, and this is where we want to get that nice, we want the paint to cling together and surface tension to flatten that lacquer out. So this is a much more critical stage. Again, you just have to take your time, and what you're doing this time is when I'm applying lacquer, I'm spraying but a much slower and a more consistent movement, and I don't stop until I've gone across the whole thing, and then I'd consider that to be a layer. So I'm not doing these kind of light dustings this time. I'm going for a more even spray. I'm going across the whole thing. I'll rotate it, and then as I rotate it, then I'll go slightly lighter, but the whole time keeping it moving until we have a nice kind of liquid looking layer that's not too heavy but enough so that the liquid tension will just cause that all to nicely flatten out. You can go too far when it comes to spraying the lacquer on with the coats, but if you look at any video of how clear coat lacquer is applied by the professionals, you'll see the kind of technique I'm talking about. It's this kind of single motion where they're going across and just moving and going across and just moving, and then that's it, there's your coat, rather than, as I said, this kind of quick dusting method that you use with the base colour. So this is what it looks like literally seconds after applying that nice wet coat of clear lacquer, and you can see just how much it brings out not only the colour but the metallic in the paint, and being a nice wet coat, you'll see that surface tension start to pull together so that this remains nice and flat and shiny when it dries. This is just one coat. You really won't need many of these coats to get the desired finish. And there we are, finished up with about 4 coats of that clear gloss, and it's a really nice deep gloss finish, which is exactly what I was after, and I think the results look really good. Another thing to note is that people will often you know, scroll up bits of newspaper and put them into the buttonholes so that you don't allow any paint to get on the inside of these kind of button areas, and I can see why people do it, you know, protecting certain holes so that they don't build up with paint and lacquer, and then the buttons, when you put them back in, get sticky and can't actually move through. Now to be honest with you, I don't feel the need to do that at all. I think that's really more of an issue if you are putting on very heavy coats of paint, and if you've kind of messed the paint job up and you've gone on too heavy with your layers. That's where the paint will start to build up around buttons. If you're very thin with your layers, as I described, and if you take your time, that will not happen, and I didn't have to do that for any of these, and all of these buttons are fine. Not a single one has stuck with either the paint or the clear coat going down. So it really is in being patient and doing that painting coat well before the lacquer goes down, and you'll find that all of that is completely unnecessary, and you'll end up with a really, really nice finish like this. And lastly, onto these custom inlays. Now I will leave a link in the description to Bloods FPV. That is Chris. He is one of my subscribers, really nice guy. He sent me these as testers, and he took my logo and designed these. They are actually on cut aluminium sheet, so they're really nice quality, and they've been kind of they've got like a screen print and then a kind of nice glossy finish on top, so they look like they'll be really hard wearing. Love the quality, and just adds to that bespoke look of your Taranis after you've done your paint job. He does ship internationally, and I think the price is very, very reasonable. So yeah, if you want to add that nice extra detail to finish your Taranis off, I can strongly recommend those. So there they are side by side. Which do you think now looks the better? You know, before I would have said the QX7, but you know, I think that kind of looks pretty plain next to the X9D. Now it's had this great new finish and a bespoke new look, and it's certainly much more eye-catching than it was before. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and do things like this. It requires nothing more than being careful and some patience, and you can certainly achieve a finish like that quite easily. easily. I will link as well in the description my video on my modifications to my Taranis. Some of the things that I have done have included upgrading to the 2-watt speaker, which makes a huge difference, how to fit a modular antenna if you want to run a 5 or higher dBi antenna, the S6 switch and how to install that and the benefits of it, etc. They're both very easy transmitters to work on. FrSky do a good job of making it easy to get into these and modify things. As always, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer and help out. You know I read all the comments and answer everything where I can. And please also consider my Patreon if you feel like helping out. It's greatly appreciated. I do put extra content on my Patreon and it helps support the channel so that I can continue to bring you helpful videos like this. So as always, happy flying guys, and I shall see you in the next one.